Full Circle by Nike Feme. Chapter 17. Aspects of Love. The golden-haired man in the distinctive red coat hummed contentedly to himself as he jogged across the irregularly defined parade square in the middle of the mass of tents, licking his fingers clean and dusting the crumbs off his shirt front. He'd made a quick stop at the mess tent, hoping to find Al and also to nab a sticky bun that was now giving him a pleasant buzz on top of the coffee. An awestruck private had volunteered that he thought Major Alphonse Elric might have gone to visit some of the wounded in post-op. And thusly had Ulrich turned his footsteps after kindly transmuting the vat of drain-colored water masquerading as tea, or go-go, it was never made quite clear which, into coffee, thereby earning the adoration of the men, which was always good for the ego, if a tad anathema to Ulrich's preference for a low profile. It didn't take much to make someone happy, he thought philosophically, and alchemy was actually proving to be rather fun. Although he wasn't quite ready to take on anything beyond simple transmutations yet. He'd also managed to imply that the suggestion had percolated down from General Mustang, which would certainly be good for Roy's reputation as a caring and far-sighted leader who could be counted on to take care of his men in matters both large and small, and would certainly go a surprisingly long way towards generating the sort of popular goodwill he would need to rise to Führer. Which event would effectively terminate the contract, its purpose having been satisfied, which would remove the restriction imposed by Ulrich's conscience with regards to the guild rule about not establishing personal relationships with clients, which therefore incentivized Ulrich to ensure the contract was completed as soon as possible so that he could find out if Mustang's hands were as good at other things as they were at braiding hair. He dragged his mind out of the gutter with an effort. Yes, a decent morning's work so far. Ulrich snorted in amusement as he caught himself analyzing and dissecting his own ulterior motives. You could take the gatekeeper out of the guild, but apparently not the guild out of the gatekeeper, it seemed. But then if Al's stories and Ed's old reports were to be believed, Ed had come up with a few similarly devious plans in the past, so perhaps it was just a natural-born talent for intrigue. The Full Metal Alchemist's legendary impatience notwithstanding, Ulrich rather had the feeling that his previous identity had been one of those people for whom things came easily, including penetrating or devising subterfuges, should he choose to put his mind to it. That affair with the gold and the deed to the mining town, for instance. The gatekeeper chuckled to himself. He was starting to become very fond of Ed. There were worse people to have been. Gene Havoc lay on his stomach and eyed the long aisle running down the post-op ward stealthily. Not a nurse in sight, and Riza had left to attend General Mustang's staff meeting. Excellent. He carefully reached for the pack of cigarettes and matchbook he had stashed under the mattress after scrounging it from one of the orderlies. Tapping the pack against his palm until one slender stick slid out, he smiled in satisfaction as he raised the cigarette to his lips, only to find it suddenly being whisked away by an annoyed-looking blonde. And it wasn't even the one with the boobs. Ulrich glared irritably at his sometime subordinate. For crying out loud, this is a hospital ward, Havoc. You are not lighting up here. Havoc fell limply back face down into the pillows. Come on, boss. I'm going crazy here. He lifted his head again. It's bad enough I have to lie on my stomach thanks to those damned holes that homunculus put in my back, but now they want to take my smokes? That's cruel and unusual punishment is what it is. What better time to quit? Responded Ulrich unsympathetically. It's a nasty habit anyway. You should drop it if you really want a chance with Captain Hawkeye. Nah, I think she's already fallen for Ulrich's charm, Havoc said blithely. Then his brow furrowed. Hey, boss, does that mean you remember being Ulrich? The reminder that Havoc, and likely everyone else in Roy's inner circle apart from Maze and Al, believed he was Ed, jolted Ulrich for a second, even as he reprimanded himself for forgetting momentarily that he had a role to play. He had worked with these people for only a short while, but he had gotten to know and respect and even like them, and he had hoped the sentiment was mutual. Were they so keen to be rid of him and get Ed back then? Sure. Kind of. Why? I don't know. I guess I wanted to thank him for his advice with Riza, and I was worried that I never got to. But if you remember what he said, then I suppose thanking you would be the same thing. It's great that you haven't lost your memories as him, boss. He was a pretty good guy. Not that it isn't wonderful to have you back, of course, Havoc added hurriedly. The General's missed having you and together. He takes it out on me and Fury instead, but it ain't the same thing. Ulrich grunted ambivalently. Bastard General, we'll see who's yelling at whom. So you liked him then? Sure, he was cool. Had a temper like yours sometimes, but he was a bit better at controlling it is all. Although you seem different, boss. Calm now, that's grumpy. Guess it has to do with achieving your goal of getting Al's body back, huh? 4 years is plenty of time to mature, said Ulrich wearily, certain he'd had a similar conversation with Mustang before. Had he really been such a hothead in the past? Havoc shrugged as best he could with the bandages wrapped around him and the multiple IVs in his arm. Aye, do you remember how to fight like Ulrich? And how'd you get your memory back anyway? Opting to gloss over the second question, the gatekeeper raised his eyebrows disbelievingly. You missed the entire thing with the Fuhrer? Sorry, Chief. I thought it was really impressive and that you disintegrated him at the end. Guess your alchemy hasn't suffered from not being used for 4 years. But I didn't see a thing, sorry. I was kind of busy being nobly wounded in the captain's arms, if you know what I mean. Winked Havoc. Ulrich sighed, but a grin tugged at the corners of his mouth as he shook his head at the irrepressible lieutenant. Get some rest, Havoc. And if you so much as think about lighting up, I'll tell Hawkeye on you. Congratulations, by the way. Now don't do anything stupid to lose her. Havoc smiled wistfully. The only way that could happen would be for the General to change his mind. A pair of golden irises flicked up to meet his gaze, and he frowned at the enigmatic look in them. Well, firstly, have more faith in Riza. She doesn't take her decisions lightly, was the calm reply. And secondly, don't worry about the General changing his mind. The wounded man blinked. Why not? He's done it before just to annoy me. A half-amused growl. Yeah, he can be a real asshole. Believe me, I know. But he's not a cheat. Especially when he knows the person he'd be cheating on wouldn't hesitate to hurt him. Permanently. And Ulrich allowed himself a flash of fang as his eyes glinted dangerously. The older man's mouth dropped open so far, he thought he'd dislocate his jaw. And then a huge grin split his face. Did I ever tell you that I love you, boss? No, wait, but I'm like that deeply respect and admire. Mustang would toast me if I thought I was hitting on... Mustang would toast me if he thought I was hitting on you. Actually, I think I speak for all the men in the mistress when I say that you have my eternal gratitude. I can't believe it. I mean, I know he swings either way, but... Wow! When? Before? Have you... No, on second thought, I don't want to know. But... Wow! The flame and the full metal! The dynamic too! Who would have thought? And... Wow! Havoc knew he was treading on dangerous ground as tawny eyes narrowed and the color rose in the blind man's cheeks. He pointed hastily to the IV in his arm. Come on, boss, you know you couldn't hurt a drugged up invalid. He smirked. I could try, was the ominous response. Oh, there's no need to be embarrassed, Chief. I'm happy for you. And me! Havoc gurgled giddily, and Ulrich made a mental note to check with the nurses as to the dosage of morphine Havoc was receiving. It seemed excessive. It's actually kind of romantic, you know. You were pretending not knowing who he is. Him not telling you, wanting to let you be free as he suffers in silence. You finally remembering who you are in order to save his life. He trailed off dreamily. I wonder what sort of stories people would tell about me and Riza. Ulrich twitched, rolled his eyes, and turned to leave. Spare me, Lieutenant. You're starting to sound like Major Armstrong. And I'd quit while you're ahead, he advised over his shoulder. Or having Hawkeye use you for target practice will seem like a nice walk in the park next to what I'll do to you. A thought struck him, and he turned back to face the still idiotically grinning Havoc. Say, have you seen Al? I came here to look for him. Al, he was it, agreed Havoc, his manic expression fading. But boss, I left with you 15 minutes ago. Did you lose him or something? Their eyes lacked in fearful comprehension. Then Ulrich was racing out the ward as Havoc yelled to the MPs at the door. Roy leaned back in his chair and stared up at the undistinguished green canvas of the tent that currently served as his office and living quarters as a nervous colonel droned on about various logistical details. What had seemed roomy with just Auric and himself in it was becoming positively claustrophobic with his much expanded staff squeezed in and sitting on whatever available surfaces there were. No help for it, though, as the largest tents had been commandeered on his orders for more essential purposes like housing the wounded and feeding the men. He knew there were a number of very annoyed officers out there at the moment, but frankly, he couldn't care less at this point. How some of those pompous, selfish excuses for leaders of men had made it this far up the ladder was beyond him. He considered their eviction from the palatial quarters they had been occupying in the middle of a war zone without thought as to the welfare of the troops a small step towards changing things for the better. His eyes glazed over as he began to sort through the various political intrigues he was manipulating at a distance back in Central. From her awkward perch with pen and paper on a box mysteriously labeled General Stores, Hawkeye looked affectionately at her CO as he lounged back, steepling his fingers before his face and assuming the negligent attitude that had lulled lesser men into the complacent thought that Roy Mustang was bored or uninterested, or simply daydreaming, when the truth was that he was simply quite capable of delegating part of his mind to the task of listening and sifting through incoming information for anything important, while the rest of him was engaging in abstract planning. Anyone who thought they could take advantage of the seemingly distracted general was very quickly put in their place, and few ever made the same mistake twice. She supposed that casual attitude that belied a fierce intellect and will was part of what she loved about the man. Love? Yes. But she wasn't in love. Once again, Auric had displayed that damnable talent for seeing through the heart of things to the one truth. He had stated that she loved the general, and that was entirely true. Risa Hawkeye was not a sentimental woman, and now that she had cleared her mind of the fog of want in that cathartic purge of weeping, she finally understood that she had confused her love of who he was to her with being in love. Oh, she cherished him greatly as a person, and she still believed in his dreams and admired his strength, and allowed herself to be led by him. She always would. And Roy had understood that, had appreciated her friendship, and respected her courage, and had willingly taken up the heavy burden that it was to lead. Unlike her, however, he had never confused that with being in love. That state where you loved the person not for their strengths, and not in spite of their flaws, but because of who they were, because of the weaknesses and foibles which made them human. That state where you are willing to face down the other's demons, and to let them face yours. That was being in love. And while a small part of her wished Roy could be that person to her, a wish shared with most of the single female population of Amestris, she knew she wasn't capable of taking on his demons, which were particularly vicious and would make even the strongest of men quail. She needed him to be the flame alchemist, Roy Mustang, the handsome, arrogant, charismatic leader of men that he was, who made her believe the world could be changed for the better through their efforts. And she would always be grateful to him that he had never once complained about the weight of those expectations and allowed her to see him drop them. She loved him for it, but she wasn't in love with him, nor he with her. She knew who the object of his affections was, though, and because she loved him, she hoped that person was in love too. If anyone could use some saving from their own demons, it was the flame and the full metal. For Roy's sake, she was very glad it had come back. Although she hoped Auric hadn't completely gone, she never really thanked him for opening her eyes and freeing her from the prison she'd put herself in. Funny how someone who professed a detachment from emotional ties outside his guild could be so good at navigating the space between others. The clarity of distance combined with Ed's innate capacity for empathy and compassion, she supposed. Not that he'd ever really made the general the beneficiary of those sentiments. Or maybe he just had a unique way of expressing them. Come to think of it, the general's sarcasm probably fell into that category too. I believe the 101st has moved west, Colonel Schmidt, not east, or have our compasses all spontaneously reversed polarity? General Mustang had neither opened his eyes nor raised his voice, but the tone he used made the already nervous colonel drop the report he was reading from. He scrambled to pick it up, dropping more papers in the process, but was saved from further mortification by the sudden entrance of a panicked sergeant. "Big credit for the intrusion, General Mustang, sir!" The non-com gasped as he attempted to come to attention, remove his helmet, and get up a salute in the limited space available to him, surrounded on all sides as he was by officers. Roy's eyes snapped open and he was on his feet in a drysile appearance of lethargy gone in an instant as he acknowledged the unfeigned attention in the man's voice. "What is it, Sergeant?" "It's Major Alwick, sir! He disappeared and we think the homunculi lured him away, and the Full Metal Alchemist's gone after him alone, sir!" A deafening silence descended on the meeting. It was broken a second later by frenzied yelling as the officers raised their voices with suggestions, each trying to get the general's attention, and then a deafening silence fell again as the general sent a lick of flame into the air inches above their heads. They all stared at him mutely. Roy fixed them with a cool look, then rapped out, "Double the sentries around the main camp. Reissue the signs and countersigns, and they are to shoot to kill immediately if the answers are unsatisfactory, regardless of who the person appears to be. Is that clear?" Nods all around. "Brigadier Hughes, I'm leaving you in command here. I'd speed up the evacuation of the wounded as much as possible." "Where are you going, sir?" Hughes asked urgently. Roy gave him a warning look. "I'm going to take a search party and go after Full Metal and Al." "With all due respect, sir," his friend began, and Roy cut him off, knowing what he was going to say, knowing he was right intellectually, and yet knowing on a completely different level that Mays was wrong. "The homunculi are our most immediate threat, Hughes. If we don't take care of this now, the chaos and carnage they could wreak with the help of their allies would be devastating, not just here, but all over the country. It could throw us into civil war, and we simply cannot afford to lose more alchemists. We've already lost a whole generation practically in this damned war, and we'll need them to help us rebuild Amestris." "Roy, you're rationalizing this," Mays Glare seemed to say. "Full Metal is quite capable of defending himself, as is the earth-moving alchemist, sir. As it stands now, with the Fuhrer dead, you're too important to endanger in this manner, sir." He loved the two boys dearly, almost as much as he loved Alicia, but he also had a job to do as XO. And on the top of the list of things an XO was responsible for was the safety of his CO, especially knowing that said CO was likely having trouble being objective in this situation. "Against one homunculus, yes, but we don't know how many are left out there. We know lust and envy are still alive, and perhaps wrath and sloth. 2-to-1 odds aren't great when you're fighting soulless creatures, Brigadier, and while I appreciate the concern, I am still first and foremost a state alchemist, the human artillery. What the military brings out when all other methods have failed. Remember, I think the situation qualifies." Roy was already buttoning up his jacket, and the other officers who had been watching this little byplay open-mouthed hastily followed suit. "Gentlemen, you have your orders. Major Armstrong, stay here, assemble the other alchemists, and fortify the camp's defenses. General, Captain Hawkeye, you—" "I'm coming with you, sir," she interrupted firmly. "State alchemist or not, someone has to watch your back." She met his gaze steadily as she picked up her rifle and patted down her pockets for spare ammunition. "I wouldn't want to have to deal with the paperwork if you got yourself killed, sir." That earned her a sardonic look, but he made no further comment, merely nodded. "Let's go."